Good morning. I'm Brian Curtis.
And I'm Doug Krisner. Here are the stories we're following today. Kevin McCarthy, no longer Speaker of the House of Representatives. Let's get to Ed Baxter. Eddie?
Yeah, quite a day, Doug. History, the vote turned out to be relatively close.
The yeas are 216. The nays are 210. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The office of Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives is hereby declared vacant.
Now, there was a thought that Democrats might rescue McCarthy. Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff says the Democrats didn't vote to save him because he's just plainly not trustworthy.
We don't feel that it's in the best interest of the country to have the House of Representatives continue to lurch from crisis to crisis.
Now, right-wing Republican Matt Gaetz has been the lightning rod behind this movement and says nobody trusts McCarthy.
Kevin McCarthy has made multiple contradictory promises, and when they all came due, he lost votes of people who maybe don't even ideologically agree with me on everything.
Now, McCarthy before the vote said he doesn't regret any decisions he's made.
At the end of the day, keeping government open and paying our troops was the right decision. I stand by that decision.
So next, well, electing a new speaker. Now, the last one resembled mud wrestling, and Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson says backroom deals are what ultimately brought McCarthy down.
That's right. And the one backroom deal he made that presumably the next person who's up for speaker will not make is the concession to allow any one member to post this motion to vacate. Yeah. And that's what Matt Gaetz demanded in return for to vote to make McCarthy the speaker, and now that has come home to roost, and Matt Gaetz has vacated him as speaker. So that was a deal that didn't turn out so well for McCarthy.
So now, if you want to put another wrinkle on all of this, Bloomberg's Rick Davis says McCarthy still has cards to play.
It's really up to Kevin McCarthy right now. Do you want to be nominated to try another run for speaker where you think you can get more than 210 votes next time? Or do you open it up to somebody else to be nominated and see how their luck fares? This is really the biggest question on the floor of the House of Representatives right now.
Yeah, so you're witnessing history. Next steps are to try and elect a new House Speaker. That will suck up most of the energy out of the chamber until the process is completed. Global news powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries, and we'll continue to have more details on this breaking story in San Francisco. I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg. Brian.
It absolutely. We'll have a lot more on this coming up shortly with Henrietta Traynor, managing partner and director of economic policy at Veda Partners, and get her insights. But first, we'll take a look at some of the other top stories. Treasury yields hitting new multi-year highs after the government reported an unexpected increase in U.S. job openings during August. We get more here from Bloomberg's Michael McKee.
We've gone up in terms of job openings by 690,000 to over 9 million again. That is a significant increase for the JOLTS report, job openings and labor turnover. Hirings, the number of people getting hired, changed little, is still at about 5.9 million. So a very stable situation there. And then the quit rate, everybody's been focused on the quit rate, doesn't change at all. Quits 3.6 million, pretty much the same as the prior month. And that leaves the quit rate unchanged at 2.3%.
Bloomberg's Michael McKee. The jump in job openings was mainly driven by white-collar positions.
And today's data on the labor market did boost the case for the Fed to keep rates elevated. We heard today from the head of the Atlanta Fed, Yellen Bostic. He was saying rates should be held at elevated levels for a long time as a way of bringing inflation back down to the Fed's 2% target. He also said he is expecting just one rate cut being appropriate in 2024, and that would happen sometime near the end of next year. Meantime, the head of the Cleveland Fed, Loretta Mester, was saying she would support another rate hike in November. We also heard from U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and she said she's keeping an eye on this run-up in market interest rates.
I'm very optimistic about the U.S. economic outlook. Short-term, inflation is coming down in the context of an extremely strong labor market. We're now engaging in a very substantial program of investments to strengthen our economy.
That is U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. Interestingly, she said, it's not a given that interest rates will stay elevated for a long period of time. Brian?
Well, a lot of uncertainty in the markets, and we saw that with what happened to the yen. The yen rebounded from the weakest levels of the year with a strong rally. Bloomberg's Joanne Wong has the story.
Japan's currency reached 150.16 per dollar on Tuesday in New York trading. The yen then soared nearly 2% in a matter of seconds to as strong as 147.43 per dollar. It last traded at around 149, with traders selling yen again as U.S. yields rose to the highest level since 2007. There is speculation that Japanese officials were acting to slow the currency slide. An official with Japan's Ministry of Finance had no comment on whether Japan had intervened on the yen. In Hong Kong, I'm Joanne Wong, Bloomberg Radio.
Later today, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand has a rate decision, and the RBNZ is seen keeping rates on hold at 5.5%. Even so, the central bank is also expected to keep open the option of future rate hikes. We have a preview from Bloomberg's Paul Allen.
All 22 economists surveyed by Bloomberg expect a hawkish hold from the Reserve Bank of New Zealand today. Inflation is trending down, but still well outside the target band. But growth is holding up. Revised data shows the country actually dodged a shallow recession in the second quarter. A hold would certainly come as a relief to the governing Labour Party, with opinion polls indicating a heavy election defeat in store in 10 days' time. Uncertainty over who forms the next government may also tempt the RBNZ to wait and see if changes to fiscal policy are coming. Paul Allen, Bloomberg Radio.
Back in the United States, jury selection was conducted today in the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried. He's accused of swindling billions of dollars from the crypto exchange FTX. Tomorrow, the prosecution will begin laying out its case. Here's Bloomberg's Kaylee Lyons.
The prosecution also will be assisted by the accounts of multiple key witnesses, some of Bankman-Fried's closest associates at the time all of this went down. Gary Wang, who co-founded FTX with him, Nishad Singh, who used to be FTX's head of engineering, and Caroline Ellison, who was the CEO of Alameda Research, the aforementioned trading firm, and also his ex-girlfriend. All of them have already pleaded guilty to federal charges and are cooperating with prosecutors, so they will be able to lean on their testimony. On the defense side, though, Sam Bankman-Fried already leading up to this trial has said repeatedly it was never his intention to commit fraud. And intention is what is going to have to be proven over the course of this trial.
That's Bloomberg's Kaylee Lyons. Bankman-Fried has pleaded not guilty to all 7 charges, including fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering. I'm Brian Curtis, along with Doug Krisner, and the big story of the day, Republican Kevin McCarthy ousted by dissidents within his own party. Joining us now is Henrietta Traynor, managing partner and director of economic policy at Veda Partners. Henrietta, thanks so much for joining us. I think that's the right way to put it, that he was ousted by dissidents within his own party. We know that the big part of the story as well is the Democrats refusing to rescue him. And we can talk about that in a moment. In the short term, it means that the speakership battle will begin again. And it doesn't mean that Kevin McCarthy won't get the job back. So how do you see that moving? And is there a lot of horse trading coming?
I think it's a very good point. The unknowns are more voluminous than anybody would care to admit. I think that what is plain is that his replacement, Patrick McHenry, is not there of his own volition. You could see that as he gavelled out this afternoon. I think Speaker McCarthy would be just a glutton for punishment if he tried to go for this again. More realistically, you'll see Representatives Emmer and Scalise either have their names thrown into the ring to either be dismissed by themselves personally, Scalise, for example, for health issues, or they will immediately sort of be rejected by the far right again for being part of the establishment or old guard. There are 196 to 210 members of the Republican Party who have supported Kevin McCarthy over the last 5 days. And for many in the far right, that's just an untenable position for them to take. So I think the effort to get to 218 is going to be fraught, and we could easily be here for weeks before we have a final speaker.
Yeah, late last month, I don't need to remind you, Moody's, the only remaining major credit grader to give the U.S. a top rating, said confidence in the U.S. was wavering a bit insofar as the firm was concerned because of their concern about governance. Where does that leave us right now in terms of how markets have to discount the dysfunction that we seem to be seeing?
I think it's a perfectly valid position at this point. They do not have anything to take to any incoming speaker and say, this is our clear list of demands. They are worried about the border, but don't know if they can send border funding or border policy to a piece of legislation. They're worried about Ukraine funding, but the Senate Republican Conference wants all the Ukraine funding that they can get. They are worried about the debt and the deficit, but they're looking to trim $60 billion in spending this year when $16 trillion needs to actually be eliminated. So I think that what's happening is you're confronting a bunch of freshmen and relatively new House members who want it all and don't know how to get any of it. And that's effectively what the ratings agencies have called them out for.
Let's talk for a moment about the Democrats refusing to rescue McCarthy. Is that pure politics? I mean, this puts the Republican Party in disarray. Some might even say chaos. Is it the right thing for the country, or was this a move really just to get a leg up on the Republicans?
You know, there were, 5 or 6 House Democrats that didn't vote today. That should have been more than enough for McCarthy to work with. He got more than that in the previous votes that he needed to maintain the speakership or to even secure the speakership. He has lost less members than that on certain key and procedural votes, such as the ones on the motion to adjourn over the weekend. There were plenty of Democrats that were not present and voting had he been able to keep the far right from eating into his caucus. So I'd have a hard time ascribing blame to Democrats here. It's also really hard to imagine Minority Leader Jeffries given an opportunity to say, go vote for another speaker when, of course, they have the permission and the ability to vote for Jeffries, which is what we'll see from them throughout next week as they start taking votes on the speaker's position.
I think we can agree this rebellion was precipitated by some of the bipartisan deals McCarthy put together, one on preventing default on U.S. debt, the other just the other day on government funding, which only takes us through November 17th. What happens after November 17th?
Yeah, that's the question. The bipartisanship is really obviously the problem for the far right, but that is the math that we have to work with. The Senate is controlled by Democrats, so that doesn't change here. I think what immediately needs to happen is we need to reassess our odds, or I certainly do, about what the prospect is for a shutdown on November 18th. And I think that what we need to start off with is a hope at the barest level that we can get some standalone appropriations bills done for perhaps defense or maybe agriculture, get those bills done so that when we do face November 18th, it's not a full shutdown, but the odds of a shutdown have to start at 65% or higher. For my clients, I usually am at about 5%. I'm very bearish on these kinds of things. I was only at 25% we would shut down going into this weekend. Now that we're in this new world, I think you have to start at least 65. I think there's a strong argument to make for 75, and I bet the street will be much higher than me come Monday morning.
We could talk until the cows come home about this story from the inside look out. But I want to go outside the United States. I look at the press out here in Asia a lot for a feature that we do. And oftentimes you hear people talk about American exceptionalism. Is this the opposite of that? I mean, does the U.S. look somewhat in disarray with something like this?
We are in an exceptional state of disarray. And there's a great quote that's effectively, we are a functional, dysfunctional unit. And I wouldn't be surprised if you hear that all over the world now. I mean, this is the height of dysfunction. And it's not even party on party. This is intra-party fighting that we see here. And these slim majorities are exactly what it makes it so difficult to govern. I can imagine some of the old guard coming out and saying, this kind of dysfunction is what keeps America, and our democratic rights alive. But it is obviously the kind of thing you think of if you want to say something good about a dictatorship. You don't have to go through this. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the argument. I mean, the disarray in the U.S., particularly when it has real ramifications on things like aid to Ukraine, are understandably a big concern for our allies and not so allies abroad.
So the temporary speaker now is Representative Patrick McHenry. Henrietta, can he bring the temperature down, do you think, effectively?
I actually have a lot of questions about what he can do. I want to know if he's capable of passing legislation. I want to know if he can put legislation on the floor. I don't expect him to immediately come in and claim the mantle of speaker. I think he's going to, at least for several hours or days, make it plain that he did not want this position. He was on McCarthy's shortlist and is not doing this of his own volition. I don't know if happy warrior is quite the way to term this yet, because I don't think he's very happy. But I do think that he is going to be the person that's in power for probably a few weeks, which will give him time to secure a foothold within the conference and try to unite them around him. And it's a heavy task, but certainly could be accomplished.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, your morning brief on the stories making news from Hong Kong to Singapore and Wall Street.
Look for us on your podcast feed every day on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcast.
You can also listen live each day on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, Sirius XM Channel 119, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Brian Curtis.
And I'm Doug Krisner. Join us again tomorrow for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.